Hey guys, this is Allie with TipBeat, and today we're going to look at how to replace the camera, the rear-facing camera, in an iPhone 4. I'm using an AT&T GSM variant of the iPhone 4. This should work for Verizon as well. The only difference is the placement of the screws on the logic board shield. So it's pretty much the same, and I'll point out the differences as we go and what you should be looking for if you're doing it on a Verizon model. The first thing, always make sure the device is powered off before you perform any repair. You're going to need a 00 Phillips screwdriver and a pry tool. If you have security screws in your dot connector, you're going to want to use a security screwdriver, so you only need that if you have the security screws. This specific phone has 00 Phillips screws. So I'm going to start with that, and the phone's already powered off, so I'm going to remove the two dot connector screws and set those aside. As a side note for replacement parts, there's a link in the article to a supplier we recommend to buy replacement parts from. They're quick, they have quality parts, and they have really good customer service. So we recommend them, but you can use whoever you want. And as another side note, keep your screws separate. They are all different sizes, so keep your dot connector screws separate from any other screws in your device, and remember where they came from. So after you have the dot connector screws out, all you do is slide this back up, pop it off, and you can set that aside. The first thing you want to do before actually replacing a rear camera is probably take your back off and look and see if the issue is not the actual camera but the back plate of the phone. If this lens is scratched, so hold it up to the light and make sure that's not scratched, because that can cause deformities in your pictures or make it cloudy. So make sure this isn't the culprit first. And if that's not scratched, you can set that aside, and then we'll need to actually replace the camera. So what you're going to do next is, again with your 00 Phillips screwdriver, you are going to first take out the battery. So this screw right here is the only screw that holds the battery in. This will be the same on the Verizon iPhone. You're going to come up with your first difference right here after we get this screw out. And again, I'm keeping all these screws organized. So after I take that screw out, I'm going to grab my pry tool, and I use this end. A spudger will work, any kind of pry tool you want to use. And then you're going to pop this clip up. I typically do it right here. And you just want to pop it off gently. So I've got that popped up. You're going to notice there's a tiny piece underneath here. You're not going to see this on the Verizon iPhone, and I'll show you after I get the battery out. The easiest way to get these batteries out, I don't use this pull tab. It typically breaks, or it can bend the battery. So I run my pry tool along the side of this underneath here. There's no components you can damage on the side here pulling the battery out. So I will just run a pry tool and break the adhesive underneath here, and I found that's a much more efficient way to pull out the battery. So pull that out, set it aside. On the AT&T variant, you're going to see this little guy sitting right here. He's not screwed in. He's actually held in with the screw to the battery. So once you take that out and pop out the battery, just set him aside. This grounds your Wi-Fi antenna, so you're going to want to put that back in when you reassemble your phone. On the Verizon variant, you're not going to see that. It's a little bit different, so you're not going to have to worry about that. Next, we're going to jump right up here and take out our logic board screws. Actually, this is the shield that is covering your logic board. This is the only shield we're going to need to take off for a camera replacement. So what we're going to do is we're going to be removing 5 screws. You're going to have the same thing on the Verizon iPhone, but the shield is shaped differently. So you're still going to have 5 screws, it's shaped a little bit more long ways. It's going to come down here a little bit more. Just remember where you took those screws out of, just like you would on the AT&T one. You're just going to, the placement's a little different because the shield is shaped different. So you're going to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws. I'm going to remove those right now and pause this for a second, just in the sake of time. Okay, so we've removed the 5 screws that are holding on the logic board shield. Again, keep these all separate because they are all separate sizes, so I don't know if you want to keep them in order of how you took them out, or if you want to remember that. However, just keep them in order. Then we're going to need to remove this shield. There's a tiny little clip right here that holds it in place, if you can see that. And we're just going to pop this up with our pry tool a little bit, just we're going to pop it out from underneath there so we can remove the shield. And then once you get that out, the shield will come up pretty easily. And we can set that aside. The Verizon variant is very similar. You've got over here, there's two little notches basically that fit underneath here, and you're just going to need to slide those up, and you'll see another little notch here. So just be careful when you remove it that you don't break it. They're kind of just held in with little notches. Alright, so then we've gotten to our camera. You're not going to really need to disconnect anything else to get to the camera. This is your camera connection, and this is going to be the same on GSM and CDMA. Your camera is going to be connected right here. So all you're going to do to replace your camera is you're going to pop up this connector from the logic board and slide your camera out. There is a little tab that's underneath your LCD digitizer connection, but it should just slide right out. So once you have that out, that's your camera. And then you're just going to reassemble the same way you're going to pop in your new camera. This camera's not bad, so I'm going to put it right back in. So to put it in, all you do is slide this little piece underneath that cable again. Make sure it's seated in there. Try not to touch the lens or anything around that. And then this cable just gets fastened right back to your logic board. And it's seated in there. And then you're going to put back on your logic board shield, which is right here. And the way I do this with the AT&T model is just get that little notch in there first, and then it'll click into place. With Verizon, get these two little notches in, and you'll see that it'll line up nicely. So I'm just going to get that little notch in there, and then you'll see that my top hole lines up, and so do these other ones. And again, in the interest of time, we're going to pause it while I replace these screws. Okay, so we've replaced the 5 screws that are holding our logic board shield in. Again, they'll be a little bit different if you're on Verizon, but same thing, just keep the screws separate and know where they came from. Once we have that back in place, now we can go down here. On AT&T, Verizon users, you can skip this step. You've got your little antenna Wi-Fi grounder that you're going to want to put back in. So to sit that in there, all you're going to do is line it up with the screw hole. It's only going to fit in here one way. So the easiest way I've found to do this is with one hand I hold this down, and with the other I pop on the battery connector. So I'm just going to hold that on, take my battery, and pop on this connector with one of my fingers. And you'll hear it click into place. And then that'll hold down your little Wi-Fi connector. And then just sit the battery in. And we'll replace the screw that holds the battery in place. And this step will be the same for Verizon users. Okay, and once you've replaced your battery screw, all you're going to need to do is put back on your back. And to do that, there's little tracks that line up with these little clips. So you're just going to sit it right in there, make sure it's in on both sides. Notice a little gap, just push it down the opposite way that you pushed it up to take it off. And then we will replace these 2 dot connector screws. And again, depending on whether or not you have security screws or regular 00 screws will determine which screwdriver you'll use for this. And you're done.